Hi guys, this is our lesson 151 and it's actually our last lesson within the topic of Modo Subjuntivo, okay? This is actually our 22nd lesson with conjugation tenses and it's our last one also. So today we will see the futuro perfecto del subjuntivo. Futuro perfecto del modo subjuntivo, or perfect future of the subjunctive mode. We said before that the subjunctive mode is actually used to express non-real situations, okay? For example, expected or desired situations, or possible or hypothetical scenarios, okay? And mainly, the main characteristic is that the declarative mode is actually suspended. There's not an actual declaration or statement, okay, of something that is really happening. So that's about the modo subjuntivo. Also, the modo subjuntivo is not so much used as modo indicativo, okay? Usually we can express the same things using the modo indicativo instead of using the modo subjuntivo. However, the perfect and refined and the academically ideal way of speaking, of course, is using the modo subjuntivo whenever it's proper to use it, okay? So that's what we are doing right now. However, let me tell you that in this case, for example, futuro perfecto del subjuntivo, for this verbal tense, it's almost obsolete right now. Or not obsolete, but it's very little used. When is it still used actually? It's used in poetry and in law books and legal documents. There's where you will see a lot of the futuro perfecto del subjuntivo, okay? But in a daily conversation or even common literature, whenever we want to express the same sentences or ideas, we will probably use a different tense of the modo indicativo, right? We will see that soon. So we will begin conjugating the verbs that end with the letters AR, right? The first group of Spanish verbs that end with ar. Example, hablar. This is a regular verb of the first group. Hablar, or to speak. Example, si al mediodía no hubiere hablado aún, avisadme. This means, if by noon he hasn't spoken yet, let me know. So take a look at this example to see when and how it is that we use the futuro perfecto del modo subjuntivo. Let's go again. Si al mediodía no hubiere hablado aún, avisadme. So, si means if, right? It is an if clause. Al mediodía means at noon. No hubiere hablado. He hasn't spoken. Aún means yet. Avisadme, let me know. Okay? So here, hubiere hablado is the verb hablar, or to speak, conjugated in futuro perfecto del subjuntivo. You can see here it is inside an if clause, right? And it's also referring to the future, a moment in the future. If he hasn't spoken yet, by some time in the future, right? Let me know. In this case, for example, this is a perfect and ideal way of expressing this idea, okay, using futuro perfecto subjuntivo. However, in a daily conversation, or even when you write, you would probably say, si al mediodía no hubiera hablado aún, avisadme, okay? So instead of using futuro perfecto del subjuntivo, we would use the conditional tense of the modo indicativo, right? But remember that, of course, this is the ideal way of declaring this sentence, and that's why we have to remember that this tense exists in Spanish, okay? We use the auxiliary verb haber, right? Hubiere, hablado is hubiere, the verb haber, that is the auxiliary verb, and hablado, from the verb hablar, or to speak. So, for the first person, I, we would say, yo hubiere hablado. Yo hubiere hablado. Tú hubieres hablado. Él hubiere hablado. Nosotros hubiéremos hablado. Vosotros hubierais hablado. Ustedes hubieren hablado. And ellos hubieren hablado. Okay? So you can take any other verb from the first group of verbs and you just replace the root of that verb with the root of the verb hablar, and then you have the conjugation of any verb you want, okay? Now let's look at the second group of verbs, the verbs that end in er or with er. Example, comer or to eat. So let's see this example. Si al regresar a casa tú no hubieres comido toda la comida, verás la que te espera. If by the time I return home you haven't eaten all your food, you will see what awaits you. Okay? Let's see again. So, the futuro perfecto del subjuntivo is within the if clause, right? Si means if. Si al regresar a casa tú no hubieres comido toda la comida. So, hubieres comido is futuro perfecto del subjuntivo. Regresar a casa means to return home. Tú no hubieres comido. You haven't eaten all your food, okay? Or you haven't eaten, actually. Toda la comida means all your food. Verás la que te espera. You will see what awaits you, okay? Okay, so you can see how the futuro perfecto del subjuntivo is used inside the if clause, and it's also referring to a hypothetical situation in the future, okay? It's in the future, and here you can see it clearly. If by the time I return home, right? So it's in the future. If by the time I return home, you haven't eaten all your food, you'll see what awaits you. So you can see that we can divide this in three different times or moments. If by the time you return if by the time I return home, that is one. You haven't eaten all your food, that is the second moment. You will see what awaits you. That is the third moment, okay? So you can see here clearly in which of the three moments it is that corresponds and that it's appropriate to use the futuro perfecto del subjuntivo, okay? We are still using the auxiliary verb haber. So let's start conjugating. Yo hubiere comido. Tú hubieres comido. Él hubiere comido, or ella hubiere comido, or usted hubiere comido. Nosotros hubiéremos comido. Vosotros hubierais comido. Ustedes hubieren comido. And ellos hubieren comido. So, now let's go to the third group of Spanish verbs, right? The verbs that end with ir. Example, vivir. Vivir is a regular verb of this third group of verbs. Vivir means to live.